In this video, we're going to talk about how you can train your hyperactive dog to focus more and be able to actually receive the information you're asking them to do and then perform the behavior that you're asking them to do.
What are you doing, Zeus? Where are you taking me? Zeus.
So this is going to be perfect for guardians who want their dog to still enjoy things like going for walks and playing in the park, doing fetch in the backyard and getting excited without getting so overstimulated that they start nipping at you or jumping at you and it just gets into a bonkers experience. Now in this video we're going to use play. So specifically we're going to be talking about how you can get a dog to be aroused, feel excitable without being so overstimulated that they can't concentrate and receive what you're doing. Now what's cool about this activity is you're not going to need any treats, at least not yet. Later on I'm going to show you a variation of this activity that if you want you can use treats, but for start you can just get away with using some toys. It is recommended that your dog knows some other behavior cues, whether that is eye contact or sit or down or spin or high five, just some other behaviors that you can start to weave into playtime. And that leads me to my first bit, which is you're actually just going to start to let your dog play. Give them that sort of toy, let them bite and chew and shake and get aroused. And then every once in a while, I want you to just pause and freeze, hold that tension, and then break it. Oh my God, everybody look at Christine. That's the pause right there that we're going for. I know Gigi just broke. All eyes on you, Christine. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't change a thing. That's the pause right there. There it is. So the only difference I would want with Christine is instead of letting go of the shark, maybe next time you move your body, but keep the shark exactly where it is so that she can decide how she feels about you moving your body. Your pause, your freeze was exactly what you want. You're holding that tension. But when you break it, it doesn't always have to mean that you let go of the shark. It might just mean that you move your body or you start talking to her again, and then she shakes the shark for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, why are we doing this? There's a couple of reasons that we're doing this. The first and foremost is that this is actually how dogs play with one another. They're going to play, hold tension. Play, hold tension. So when you start playing with your dog, I want you to start to weave some of those canine principles that we see dogs implement. I want you to start to weave those into the interaction with the dog. Now, the other reason that we're doing is that eventually when we get to the second step of this activity, you're actually going to start to ask your dog to do behaviors in these pauses. And if you haven't been practicing the pause to begin with, it's going to be pretty hard to ask for the behavior later on. So for right now, I just want you to shake, or toss the ball, or scratch your dog up, give him lots of love-ins, play, pause, hold that tension, and break. Okay, so in the case of Lily, where she kind of got the zoomies, you're right to just wait it out. Just hold tight. Don't interrupt it. Just let it have its moment. She's just telling you that's what she needs for right now. And then wait for her to be re-engaging with you to initiate that pause again. That moment with Lily was beautiful. Oh my God, that moment with Lily, I'm gonna use that later, where you're on the floor and she kind of just had that bent, she had that curve. That's what we're going for. She's gonna mimic you when you start moving. Look at her freeze there. Oh my goodness, look at that. She's like waiting for you to pounce. Look at her, look, yeah, there it is. Oh, that was such a good moment. Look at that. Oh, what a happy girl. There's a pause with Lily. Good. What a good pause that is. Good job. Now, I know that there are a lot of different definitions of what hyperactivity and arousal or arousal control actually looks like per dog. So for the purpose of this video, and for that matter, the purpose of my channel, here's how I define hyperarousal or hyperactivity. It is not that we are trying to get the dog to go from like excitement to crashing on the floor and in a complete like relaxed Zen state. That would be a completely different activity in my opinion. That's trying to get the dog to decompress energy. When I'm thinking about arousal control or hyperactivity, what I'm thinking about is how can we stimulate the dog's brain, get them super active and excited. Probably there's a lot of adrenaline, probably there's a lot of dopamine, probably there's a lot of cortisol, but he's still able to think. He's still able to stay in that executive functioning. He's still able to stay in that logic thinking. So the way I compare arousal control, which is what we're teaching the dogs in this case, is like a runner. This morning I ran a 5K, and when I'm running, I know that I am safe. I know that I am not being chased or hunted down or in danger in any way. But I have adrenaline running, but I have cortisol, but I've got all of these other neurotransmitters going off, right? So my body is still in a very excitable state, but I'm still pretty logical about it and I'm not losing my mind. Yeah? That's what we're trying to get the dogs to do with this activity. We're trying to get them in a place where they can go running without absolutely losing their minds, and they're still able to listen clearly and think critically. Okay, so the second step of this activity is that you're gonna start to interweave cues or behaviors for your dog to do in that pause. And this is kind of something that's different from me from other trainers, is I don't actually like it when guardians are putting a behavior or a cue between every single pause, because I think that that kind of ruins the integrity of the play session. If we want to make sure that we're making this play session overall pretty enriching and social, then ironically, making a play session now obedient or behavior that the dog has to display can often taint the integrity of why we started the play session in the first place. And if anything, it will actually just kind of suppress some of their energy instead of keep them stimulated. So you can do a couple of different behaviors. You can do eye contact. You can do something like a touch where you're having your dog target your hand. You could also do things like having a shake or a paw. What you ask your dog to do doesn't really matter as long as A, they're not afraid of whatever you're asking them to do, and B, that they are familiar enough with the cue. If it's a brand new behavior that they just started learning, maybe this isn't the time to start challenging them with that behavior. So what you're gonna see right here is mom is gonna ask Gigi for eye contact in the middle of this pause, right about here. She's gonna ask for it, and Gigi doesn't quite give her that eye contact. She gave her a really solid freeze, and they broke that tension, which is great and all, but it's not quite working with the eye contact because Gigi's eye contact behavior isn't as proficient as we want it to be. So instead, what mom's gonna try is she's going to substitute out the eye contact, but ask for touch. There's that hand target that she asked for, and then Gigi gives it to her a little bit, just not quite. For the ones that are asking for a touch, if you're playing tug, where the whole point is who's gonna let go of the rope first, they may not be willing to give you a touch because that means that they have to let go of the rope, and who wants to do that? It's a harder criteria. I just don't want you to underestimate it is all I'm saying. It's not that you shouldn't get your dog to grow to that standard. I just want you to be aware of what the standard is. I would take the paw. Yeah, I would take that. There it is. That's a good one. The point isn't necessarily like what tricks can we get our dog to do. The point is, can we get them to process the information we are giving them despite their level of excitement? Oh. Okay, take that. Good job with banana. There it is. Okay, everyone play for about 30 more seconds, then I'm going to ask you to slowly disengage from your game. Because they are aroused, it would be unfair for you to just walk away and shut down all of a sudden. That's not fair. But slowly start to wind down the game with your dogs. Let them know that we're transitioning into the next thing. Nice. Now that we're in step 3 to be able to help your dog's hyperactivity and that super arousal, now you have basically 2 options. You can either, option 3A is to change the behavior that you were asking. So if you were asking for eye contact before, you might pick a harder behavior, like we have Banana here doing the paw, right? That's a harder skill. And it requires that he's able to hold his mouth on that toy while still offering the paw. Now, importantly, we can see that you're still not asking for that behavior, even if it's a harder one, between every single freeze, because you don't want to, again, taint the integrity of the freeze. 3B, option 3B, is to make it far less predictable. So maybe you're still picking easy behaviors. Maybe you're still picking touch or eye contact or sit, if those are really easy for your dog. Maybe you're still picking easy behaviors, but you're changing them between different repetitions. So each time you want to ask for a behavior in a freeze, maybe that's not every single freeze, you will change what you're asking for. Sometimes you're gonna ask for a sit, sometimes you're gonna ask for eye contact, sometimes you're gonna ask for down. What you ask for doesn't really matter, and if your dog doesn't follow through, that's okay, just pick a different behavior. But you use whether or not they're able to perform the behavior as information on how overstimulated or how able are they to concentrate in that logic thinking part of the brain. So in this video, we're gonna see a variation of this game, but with a box and with some sort of other stimulation. So as opposed to you using a a toy where it's just you and your dog interacting, perhaps you wanna get your dog stimulated in something else. Now in this case, we're practicing with a box full of wrapping. I think there's like tissue or something in there, it doesn't really matter. But to be honest, if you want to practice with a box, that's great, but you could also use like a practical scenario where, like, let's say there's a part of your backyard that your dog is always getting his nose into and he's always really excited by and he's overstimulated. Just use that practical real world situation and train with that. If it's easier to use a practical arousing environment as opposed to just kind of manifesting one in your living room with the wrapping paper, that's the best way to do it. And effectively what you want to do is let your dog get pretty engaged with whatever that exciting thing is. In this case, we see Zeus going off about all of his wrapping. And every single time that he decides to check in with mom, she's going to mark and feed. Importantly, he doesn't have to check in with mom. She's not asking him to come back and look at her. She's just waiting for him to do it naturally. Why? Because this is like the first day that they're practicing. But B, because we don't want to teach our dog that this is a staring contest. We don't want to teach our dog that the objective is to just always look at us and never, think critically and never go off and do something fun. That's not the point. The point is that even when you're getting excited, even when you're getting stimulated, I still want you to at least sometimes remember that I exist, will you? And remember that I sometimes might be communicating to you. I might sometimes say something that is important that I'd like you to respond to if you can, right? So we can see Zeus getting more and more stimulated. And what you could do out of this, which I can't remember exactly if mom is gonna ask for a sit or not, but what you could start to do is in this moment where Zeus comes back to her, as opposed to just feeding right there, she could have asked for a sit, and then when he gives it, then mark and feed. Now the next step of this activity is to start to play the arousal game in a more stimulating environment. So in this case, we have Groot who's actually practicing in a bigger open backyard, and there's another dog barking next door. The fences are actually see-through so he can see what people are walking by. And at first, we go right back down to not asking for any cues. So we're gonna still look for those freezes where we're gonna let our dog play with their toy, or perhaps you're playing with them. We're gonna look for those freezes and we're gonna mark and feed for those pauses. But we're not gonna explicitly ask for a behavior just yet. We might see if they're willing to approach us. You might get that organically from your dog, and if you do, it's a good idea to mark and feed that, but don't interrupt those moments incessantly. And ideally, you're just capturing your dog for making the decision to check in with you, and every once in a while, you want to ask for a behavior, ask for a sit, ask for a down. What you don't want to do is always ask for a behavior. Now, this sort of brings me to my next point, which is that sometimes we want to be predictable for our dogs, sometimes we want to apply structure and predictability, and sometimes you don't want to apply predictability. Sometimes you want to be spontaneous, and both can have pros and cons. The conditions where you would most likely want to give your dog some consistency, that is, you're saying the same cues over and over and over again. Maybe you are behaving the same way, so you're playing with the same toy, you're doing the same type of play style. The conditions when you would want to do that are often when the rest of the world is chaotic. So for example, if I'm working with a reactive dog or a leash reactive dog, and they feel as if their world is chaotic and overwhelming, then I am going to intentionally make sure that when I'm playing with them, playing fetch like we are with Yuffie, and we're causing those interrupters or we're causing the pause and we're feeding sporadically, I'm gonna try to make sure that there's as much of a pattern as possible. I'm gonna try to make it so that my dog is likely to be able to anticipate something, some sort of structure from me, because the rest of the world feels so chaotic. On the other hand, let's pretend for a second that your world is pretty structured. There's no reason for your dog to be stressed so much from the environment. Your dog feels like he can't anticipate what's happening. Then it makes sense for you to want to challenge his brain by giving cues less repetitiously, by giving information less pattern oriented. Perhaps you're changing the cues that you give, the behaviors you ask for, the things that you do. Maybe you're changing the way you say cues, or you're changing the way that you ask for behavior. Sometimes you're using a visual cue, sometimes you're using a verbal cue. It makes sense for you to change your pattern in those conditions because you're asking your dog to really pay close attention, and they're able to listen to that key information simply because everything else in their environment or everything else in that context is as expected. They don't have to overanalyze what's happening around them. They understand what's happening around them, and they can afford to just listen in to what you're saying. So just to recap the arousal game and how you're going to play this game. You're going to start off the arousal game inside your house or your backyard with some sort of low stimulating environment, right? You're going to practice with a toy first. I don't recommend using any treats. Every couple of seconds, you're going to play, and then you're just going to hold that tension. You're just going to pause as if it's a dog play, right? You're going to play, hold the tension. Once your dog is starting to understand that, like, every once in a while we pause and then we break, then you're going to start to add in cues of some sort. So you're gonna ask for eye contact or touch or sit or whatever. We're not doing it every single freeze. You do not want to ask for a behavior every single freeze. Then you're going to start to ask for a more difficult behavior. Maybe if before you were asking for eye contact, you might ask for a spin, or you might ask for a touch, or you might ask for a paw. Once your dog is giving those pretty predictably, you can start to change the predictability by changing the behaviors that you ask for. Again, you're still not doing it every single freeze. You're only doing it in certain freezes, but the behavior you're asking for in those freezes is changing. Sometimes you're asking for a touch, sometimes you're asking for a paw, sometimes you're asking for a down, and so forth. Finally, you're taking this behavior into a more stimulating environment or stimulating context. You could do this by picking a situation where your dog is likely to be stimulated. For example, if there's a part of your bushes outside in your backyard, or you could take a box and start to stuff it with a bunch of treats. You're going to start to take a situation where your dog tends to get more aroused, and you're going to start all over. You're going to start off with just looking at, every once in a while when my dog gives me eye contact, can I mark and feed that? Then can I get my dog to really give me some sort of behavior? Maybe they're walking up to me. Maybe I'm asking for a touch. Maybe I'm asking for a stay, whatever it may be. Once you have that in a more stimulating context, then you want to start to take it outside where there's even more triggers or even more stimuli, right? And now as you start to progress it into more and more practicality, I want you to be thinking about what behaviors can you ask from your dog that makes sense within this situation. So if you are practicing, on a loose leash walk, it probably doesn't make sense for you to start dropping in a bunch of spins on the sidewalk. You're probably instead going to ask for a loose leash walk structure, right? So you want to be conscious of what is the context or what is the environment that we're in, and how does that inform us on what behaviors we should be asking for. The most important part is that you're always aware of, is the environment or is the context arousing and stimulating and challenging enough, or is the environment stable enough, more predictable enough that you can afford to ask for randomized behaviors with no rhyme or reason, right? You're really disrupting the pattern in that way. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit like, consider subscribing for more dog training advice, and I'll see you guys in the next video.